and gave a raft of issues that today also they will be tabling in the National Assembly for discussions. So the MPs will be also broaching these issues, some of the salient points that were raised by the President during that particular address to the National Assembly and the Senate as well, to see what is the way forward. Huge on that particular address was the eye-popping figure of 300 billion shillings that needs to be salvaged right now in the current budget that we have in Parliament. So we have been having a lot of wastage as far as that is concerned. But more importantly as well is now the lifting of this ban on GMOs, which is headlining the front page of the Standard today. Ruto turns to GMOs in face of food crisis. And it's all about the drought solutions here, with more than 4 million Kenyans on the brink of starvation. The cabinet decided that lifting the ban, increasing irrigation and diversifying crops will be the long-term solution to perpetual problem. This is well fleshed out for us on page 10 of the Standard this morning. The journey has been given for you. I don't need to belabor that. We spoke about it when we just opened the show. This is from 2000 to where we are currently with Kenya lifting this particular ban. Remember, we had that particular convention, that is the protocol on biosafety from the KTN conference that was there, and they came with the KTN, I should say, protocol on biosafety. So the issue of regulations on GMOs so far, has it been set in place, or since we have this particular lifting, then we're going to put everything in order first of all? And looking also on the sidebar there, we have loose cannon, Gachagua, and his many gaffes. On Sunday, spoke to, of course, the media, and he said that, quote unquote, we are looking for a professional DCI, not a politician, not a drama queen who want a DCI who will not spend. We want a DCI who will not spend time on drama and press, who will investigate cases properly. This is what he was stripping off his tongue on Sunday. But remember, also he spoke to members of a diplomatic corps, and he questioned the members of a diplomatic corps who could not really act as farmers, to try and find markets in their countries for our farm produce. I don't know how that was received by the diplomatic community, but we are also looking at also a spat between the governor of the central bank and what he said regarding the shilling. No sooner that really tripped off his tongue, the shilling dropped quite precipitously until we had the CBK giving assurance about the shilling, and it also now started stabilizing and regaining, of course, stability moving forward. So he had said that the country has no enough forex reserve. First of all, let's just begin with you, Edwin Sufuna, on this issue of the GMOs. This has been such a long, protracted debate that I can remember we've been talking about it for donkey years. Yeah. And right now we have the resumption of it. We had assurance from biosafety that all is well as far as GMOs is concerned. But what does it really take for a government to lift this ban? And what sort of measurements, regulations, frameworks should be put in place before everyone starts importing GMOs from every which way? I mean, every other place of the world.
Yeah, allow me to just say something on the topic you closed with before the break, on the persons who've been proposed to be cabinet secretaries. Okay. First of all, there is, I believe, an inordinate focus on criminal convictions when we talk about Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is not about criminal convictions. Article 73 of the Constitution sets out 3 criteria for leadership, and that is personal integrity, competence, and suitability. Mm-hmm. Competence and suitability are not arrived at or determined in a criminal process, mm-hmm. So that an objective analysis of all these people who have been proposed, mm-hmm. Without necessarily resorting to court matters or who is being charged for what, really should be able to tell Kenyans who's suitable to be head of public service and who's suitable for Minister of Finance. Suitability is something we can determine objectively if we have an honest discussion. I have argued that, in fact, you can have personal integrity and be competent for a position, but not suitable for that position. You can actually have competence and suitability for a position, but you lack personal integrity to be able to do that job. I have also argued that, in fact, in the absence of personal integrity, then really there is no need to go into any further inquiry as to whether you are competent for a position or suitable for a position. So all these conversations must be had. I can tell you that the reaction of Kenyans across the world when a certain name is mentioned tells you that people objectively know that this person is not suitable for the position that is being proposed. We have people who are openly incompetent, not just for the positions that are being proposed, but for any position whatsoever, you know. And competence is something that is determined through various, analysis, your level of education, the experience that you've gathered, These are things that can actually be established through an objective process. So personally, I believe that even putting aside this question of, there is no criminal conviction, the case has been withdrawn, leadership, Chapter 6 requires that it is a public trust that is exercised in a manner that demonstrates even the respect for the people. The president must respect the people who elected him. And we do not necessarily want that these positions are extended to people who did not support him. Even within Kenya Kwanza, and I can say this objectively, even within Kenya Kwanza, there are people that I don't agree with their politics, but I know that they are competent and suitable for certain positions. But there are others, whether they are in Kenya Kwanza or even in Azimio, will just tell you that this is a joke, So there are names on that list. If you ask me, somebody like Professor Kithure Kindiki, is he competent and suitable for any position in government? I would say a straight yes without thinking. But there are other names, my brother, whether you like to admit it or not, those people are not suitable for cabinet. And I'm hoping that our brothers in the National Assembly will stay true to the oath that they took to defend the Constitution, to defend Article 73, to defend Chapter 6 of the Constitution. That in fact they are Kenyans. They are Kenyans. Of course, you expect that any president who's really keen on making sure that his agenda works would avail himself of all the talent that is available to him in the country, irrespective of their political persuasions. But we know this president is not like that. He doesn't think like that. So I am saying that even within Kenya Kwanza ranks, I can assure you, there are people who can do the job. It was not necessary for them to overlook. If you are looking for a woman from the coast who can be able to do a job, really, you are telling the people of the coast, or even those in Kenya Kwanza, that Aisha Jumwa is the best bet for that position or any position in public service? It's a big joke. She is simply not competent or suitable for any position in public service, and that is just an objective view. It has nothing to do even with the criminal cases, because we know who she is. I have been her SG for the past 4 years, so I know she's not competent at all. Now, when we come to the question of GMO,
before we go to the question of GMO,
yes.
I needed to ask, even when the president is actually selecting and having this particular nominees, first of all, with questionable characters and also court cases pending, would it be a discretion and a good gesture from him, first of all, to make sure that at least the court cases,
in fact,
they've gone to the full logical extent, and it has been determined? Because what happens if the court finds someone guilty, and now you've been appointed?
The most interesting thing is that we had this phenomenon in the past administration of people stepping aside immediately, or in fact mentioned adversely, let alone being charged. I think it is the Leadership and Integrity Act that requires that if you're a public officer and you are charged, you're supposed to leave office for the duration of your trial and receive half pay. So you can imagine people who are already undergoing that particular process being injected back into the public service instead of being kept outside for them to be able to conclude their matters. And I know it is difficult in Kenya Kwanza to find people who don't have active cases, but still, I know that there are good people in Kenya Kwanza who can be able to hold forth for the duration of time. People like Chirchir. He was asked to step aside when there was, I think charges in his ministry the last time, or was it not him?
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah. So it doesn't communicate a government that is ready and willing to serve the people, to be able to solve these problems. I mean, we are facing the greatest challenges of our times, you know. People have to come up with serious solutions to the problems that we are facing. And the people that you surround yourself with, in fact, it has been argued that just by the names that he has proposed, it is clear that William Ruto wants to run all the ministries, because he knows the capacity of these people. They are not going to be anything other than figureheads in their ministries, you know. So we are hoping that at least you communicate a seriousness in your approach to tackling the problems that are facing us. On the question of GMOs, again, I want to ask this current administration to carry people along. We know that we did not support you, and we probably, you know, are never going to see things from the same perspective. But I'm saying we are in the same boat now. That in fact you need to carry people along, persuade people. This issue of just waking up with edicts and decrees, it was first Sarawi, then it was something else, then it is now GMO food. I am a firm believer in science myself. But I know that there are other people who need to be persuaded, and that process of persuasion is actually something that is required of us in our constitution. So there was, Manzo here was just reminding me that in fact this matter was in Parliament at some point, then the ban was put into effect. So if there are changes in the science or whatever it is, we need to be told so that we put in place regulations. In fact, the biggest fear is that, you know, the global corporations that, you know, run the GMO sector go through this research and science to develop seeds that have certain resistances, produce greater yield, but then they come with very serious patents that in fact the global corporation that develops that seed, so say Monsanto has come up with a variety of sugarcane that matures in 2 months. Everything you know, required to make that product successful has to come from them. So it is every single input. It is the seed, it is the fertilizer, it is the technology. So it has been proven in other jurisdictions that it becomes very restrictive for farmers to move from one seed to another. Questions of even pollination, you know, where even your farm, you know, if your neighbor is using a certain seed, then the entire region is actually zoned out for that particular product because of those patent issues. So we are saying there is nothing wrong. We understand science. It can be explained to us. And also have regulations that then allow people to have the choice. So if there are 2 packets of unga on the shelf, and one is GMO and the other is not, do we have regulations in place to allow me as a consumer to be able to pick the one that I want? If I still have doubts as to the safety or whatever reasons, there are even objections based on religion, that we should not tinker with creation, you know? And
genetic makeup of all this.
Absolutely. So there are all those conversations
that needs to be considered. And I think there is also a very important point, especially when it comes to cross-pollination, because I believe that was a subject that was very contentious, that if I'm a farmer, a large-scale farmer, and you are, you know, of course, having seeds on GMO growing on your farm, and I'm not on GMO, and I'm not also subscribing to GMO, and there's issue of cross-pollination. Now, we can't prevent and control, you know, this vectors, so to speak. We can't. Then how do you control that? That now I have my area also being affected by that cross-pollination. I think there are a raft of issues that need to be considered.
So all I'm saying, Dibal, is that you need to carry people along. Article 10 of the Constitution requires that there be public participation in these things. I know that it comes from a good place. You know, I always have doubts. When some of these policy pronouncements are made, you just know that there is a deal in the wings that we will hear about 3 years later. But in fact, when it comes to the discussion of how we achieve food security, you know, we must open ourselves to technological advances in science to be able to resolve some of these problems, but carry everyone along. Just have a conversation with people. We will understand.
Right. I know you were the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes.
You can also just peg on your experience as well. I don't know if this debate of GMO is also...
It was there.
It was there before.
Remember, we formed the biosafety policy, national policy framework. And the framework was clear that you must take people through the various stages of research. And we had research here at Kari, near Nairobi School, which was doing it under controlled environment.
Currently, Calro.
Calro, yes. Now, the challenge is one. Even in the countries where GMO is allowed, it is under strict regulations, and it is not meant for consumption even within those states, and if they are to be consumed within the states, they are clearly marked that this is GMO product and this is non-GMO product, so that we have a latitude of freedom to decide on what to do. The second issue is that in some of the fields, if you have planted GMO material, you have to allow that field to rest for a number of years before you plant any other material that does not have any GMO. Now, the lifting of the ban is a blanket statement that is lifting even for animal feed, which is laced with GMO products. When you bring animal feed and you feed into our animals, the products from those animals, whether it is meat, whether it's milk, whether it's eggs, or whether it's chicken, all that will carry some residual elements of GMO. This therefore means we are consuming GMO indirectly in the name of food security. Third and most important thing is the issue of the seed itself. These GMO seeds, they have what they call terminator seed. Terminator seeds mean that they have a certain life, that when you plant the seed, you do not have a chance of using the same seed to move to the next generation of crops. So even the seed companies, they are at risk. The research that we've been doing under Kenya Seed Company and under ADC and many other research institutions are likely to be subjected to this, because they will give you a seed that for you to go back to farming, you go for the same seed because it has what we call terminator elements, that once it is used, you use it once and you don't go back to it. There's the other issue, which is also very important, is that what we should have done is to do them gradually. We have what we call BT cotton, biotechnology cotton, that has less harm because you don't consume. But the moment you are bringing something that you are going to consume without the requisite safety nets, you are actually subjecting Kenyans to diseases they cannot control. You go to some of these countries, there are lifestyle diseases which have been caused by consumption of some of the products which have accelerated growth. You find a piece of chicken that has been a young chick that has been hatched, within 3 months it is fully grown. And when you consume that, it has the effect of causing a bit of malfunction in your body. You end up bloating yourself beyond your capacity. So these are some of the challenges that the president should have taken into consideration before doing that. This issue of saying the Institute of Science and Technology has said it's okay, it is not with full participation of all the experts that we have in this country. It is something that is laced with a bit of interest beyond the present. It's not about food security. Food security means you produce more in a sustainable manner within the nutritional value, and you present to people who can afford. It is not about just producing so much all of a sudden that when you consume, you run the risk of having side effects. We are doing so in a country where regulations have been floated, whether it's about these alcoholic drinks, whether it's about chemicals for farming. It is proven that in some of the areas where certain crops are grown and certain chemicals are used, there is higher prevalence of cancer among the farmers of those places. And therefore, it means some of the chemicals that we use in farming, like maize or any other farming enterprise, they are laced with some of these materials, which makes your body susceptible to certain attacks. Finally, GMO is genetically modified organism, which means what you are doing is you are re-engineering the genes, because there is certain pattern of genes from the time you are formed as a zygote in your mother's womb. The product will move multiplication. After multiplication, you start specialization. And there are some of the genes that are called, some of the process called gene switching, where multiplication continues. After a certain period, you now specialize. You have a arm, you have the face, you have the eyes. Now, in that area of specialization, the genes which were just multiplying are switched off. so that you can improve now on specialization. That's how human beings and animals and even plants are formed. Otherwise, if you interfere with that gene switching, you can produce what we call blastula. And blastula is an organism that may have malfunctions. You find a child with 2 heads, another one with possibly the chin on the chest, and so forth, because there is a pattern that has been messed up. Because by somebody coming and looking like you or looking like me, there are certain processes of gene switching. So when you do engineering of an organism, you modify, you are already creating something which is not in the natural state. These are some of the fundamental issues, and I feel William Ruto is testing Kenyans on the extreme, because he seems to have a tendency of doing it the way he wishes. But he should realize he's the chief executive of this country. You can no longer do things that I can do in my household the way I wish. He must listen to Kenyans. And he may be informed up to PhD level in terms of that research. I may be informed up to a certain level. But up to now, there has not been any conclusive research to say genetically modified organisms, when you feed, it does not have side effects. If there is that research, you should tell us. Yeah.
So the Kenya Institute of Science does not really suffice. It should be peer reviewed.
It should be peer reviewed, and also this is intellectual arrogance. They pretend that they know everything, but that is arrogance of the first order. I was the minister in that ministry. I had 90 PhDs. I used to engage them. Can you tell me? I'm a layman. Can you advise me on this? And what I'm telling you is not what I'm reading in books. This is the information that came from the experts. And some of these international organizations don't mean well for Africa. They can create a lot of diseases in Africa that as we struggle with those diseases, they're struggling in another research to come back to us and say, okay, we have found an answer for the diseases that you have in Kenya. So this is something that I appeal even to the religious society. They must take this issue of GMOs seriously. It's not about food security.
When we broach that issue, I think on the BT cotton as well, this is where they've been hailing it as a success. And as you say, that is not truly for consumption, because that is really, outside the body. But when it comes to anything that we're ingesting, we actually putting in our bodies as well at the end of the day, that is very critical. I wanted just to broach that issue of, you're talking about the gene editing right now. We're talking about eugenics. Eugenics has become such a big also word when it comes to the gene editing and trying to purify also the races with eugenics. It is not very far from where GMO it is right now. And the effects of eugenics at the end of the day. This is, if it's not happening within your own genes as a person, then it can come through the food that you eat. I know it's purely scientific.
It is scientific. The rule of the thumb, nutritionists will tell you, the rule of the thumb, if you started eating potatoes at birth, or eating maize or unga, like Sifuna and I, anytime you miss unga for some time, you crave for it. That's why Sifuna, every other afternoon, will want ugali. Because in terms of scientific value, you are what you eat. Whatever is in your genetic makeup from childhood has been ingrained in your system, that if there is any deficit of it below a certain threshold, you go for it.
But Sifuna will go through the withdrawal symptoms of ugali and get the shakes and then adjust as well. It is just the withdrawals, because the chemical composition has been readjusted to one ugali.
I can confirm that indeed I am entirely made of unga.
Yes, Dibala, in fact, this matter, I've been in the National Assembly for 10 years, and for quite some time it was a big topic. When it comes to BT cotton, some of the experiences in the world are that you see the byproducts of BT cotton will either be used as animal feed, of which you end up eating the same animals, and some of them will also become manure and eventually will be taken up by other crops. And one of the experiences in India, which I became aware of from the Committee of Agriculture in the National Assembly, was that the byproducts of BT cotton were given to animals. And these animals became sick and died, meaning the effects are adverse. Again, also some people have complained that upon wearing clothes made of BT cotton, they will get allergies. And therefore, what we are trying to say with these GMOs, and the president, William Samoei Ruto, knows very well, first of all, as a scientist, and secondly, as somebody who has been Minister for Agriculture, and thirdly, as somebody who is very well briefed. And we know throughout the time of the last 10 years when he was Deputy President, he knows the main government was very careful on GMOs, but he himself is a supporter of GMOs. And this is not about food security. If they want to sort out the hunger issue in Kenya, there are so many farmers in the Rift Valley and in many other places with a lot of stock of maize and other foods which has not been sold out to the rest of the Kenyans. So if we were to buy from our own farmers, there's enough food in this country. And the rains are about to be here. And if we do irrigation, we will completely supplement. The issue of GMO is a commercial issue. There are interested parties, and it's a big-time business venture, which the President William Samoei Ruto has been waiting to get into. And I believe this is a big business, but to the risk of a lot of Kenyans. The moment you bring GMOs here, you need to give Kenyans a choice. One of the things they did not do in one afternoon cabinet sitting, which cabinet is a caretaker cabinet, as we are waiting for full appointment of cabinet, and probably not properly constituted, they did not do public participation. There are many other Kenyans, there are scientists in this country who support GMOs, and there are many other scientists in this country who don't support. So we would have seen a feedback of Kenyans. They would have gone through a process so that every Kenyan can also know. And also we must have a process of getting the goods marked, just like in many countries. You make a choice whether you want to die quickly with GMOs or you want to live long with organic farming. There are organic shops where people, even they never use fertilizers. They use natural methods to grow food for natural people, and it's more expensive than the rest. So Kenyans have to be given this choice. I think this decision has been rushed. It has not followed public participation, and therefore unconstitutional. And in fact, Kenyans should be up in arms against this, especially those who don't support GMOs. Those who want to go to court, they should go to court. There must be a process on approval of GMOs. If you want to bring in GMO, genetically modified food here, it should be announced. This relief food or whatever food they are going to bring is GMO. So that Kenyans can make a choice whether you want to consume GMOs or not. And one of the side effects of GMOs, and the scientific researches have been conducted in the US and other places, and even there have been suits against GMO producing companies by individuals who get cancer or die out of consumption of this food. So we must be given a choice. You should not force it to the throats of Kenyans. We have to have proper and very objective scientific reporting of this. And it's not a Kenyan problem, it's a worldwide problem. Finally, the American government, who are very good at this and have serious research, have an act of Parliament not allowing the President of America to consume GMO at all. Why? Because it will kill him, or has a possibility of doing that. And therefore, I will encourage also William Samoei Ruto not to consume GMOs. It's a practice. And therefore, not feed it to Kenyans. Unless a Kenyan wants to die quickly and wants to consume this, they must make a choice.
Right. So in a country, Edwin Sifuna, where we saw just last week or the week after that, before that, KEBS, Kenya Bureau of Standards, advising Kenyans that they should not be also partaking some of this cooking oil that were in the shelves in the supermarkets, and they were all listed there. Some of the brands came out, strongly to actually say their products are safe as far as that is concerned. We have the Food, Drugs and Administration in the US, which also requires their government or any manufacturer who is under the food chain supplying food or any value addition to foods as well, they should clearly indicate in their products that this is a GMO product, or this has this particular element or substance, be aware before you consume it as well. This has not been properly done in this country, and I wonder how then that will be put into place, if this at all will fly. And you've talked to the interests. You've talked of the interest. Two things I wanted to ask you. You've talked of the interest as well of big players. You mentioned, and I think you've mentioned Monsanto. We know of other firms like Syngenta as well, who are largely in this particular space. How then do we make sure that there is no clammy fingers of these big industry players also who are steamrolling this particular lifting of this ban?
Yeah, I think as with every scandal that we have seen in the past few years in this country, the truth always comes out later. This is driven by commercial interests, as my brother has said. During the campaigns, we had opportunity to speak to the farmers in the Rift as to why they feel that many of them have been dissuaded from farming. Traditionally, people who've been growing maize have opted out. Some of us, including myself, used to grow maize and sugarcane. We've completely moved away from that, and the reasons were given very clearly. Number one, there is a lack of a clear market for their produce, because the very same people who are in power, instead of prioritizing purchasing of maize from our local farmers, have been the ones importing maize from the Mombasa regions, from Uganda largely, and then they come and even jump the queue at the NCPB stores, and then they leave the farmers with their produce rotting. We had made a promise to Kenyans that in fact we would not purchase a grain of maize from outside Kenya if there was any farmer, even with one bag of maize still in his store. So we are hoping that, and then the other point that was raised by the farmers themselves was the cost of inputs. I can tell these farmers that they should not expect that these GMO seeds and inputs are going to be cheap. In fact, it is like, I don't know how I don't know which analogy I can give, but you're getting hooked. It's like getting hooked on a drug. That you will take it the first time, and then you are hooked, and it is not cheap. It is going to be very, very expensive to produce food in this country. If we really wanted to, achieve this food security that we're talking about, then what my brother Kebruto Kiru, and I'm happy that he has experience in this, having been in the Ministry of Agriculture, is proposing is what exactly should be done. That in fact we should focus on lowering the cost of inputs, assuring a market for our farmers, and then moving away from rain-fed agriculture. That we can't always have these stories of rainfall failing, and we know that we are in the middle of a climate crisis, and it is no longer dependable that we continue with rain-fed agriculture. So even the things that you're talking about, personally, I have very serious doubts as to whether there is bona fides in any of the things that are announced by this government. And that is why I can say that at least the people's representatives, we of us who are in parliament, and this is why we are calling that instead of making these unilateral decisions as cabinet or as executive, let there be proper engagement of the people. And it is we who are their representatives who will explain to them. Because when I go home right now, or I go into the estates here, it is me, the people will ask whether it is safe for them to eat this unga. And by the way, Dibal, for somebody who is starving, this labeling we are talking about is a completely false choice. It's a completely false choice. Because if you have ever seen, there's people who have stories in the newspapers who have consumed even meat from animals that have died from disease, and they all fall sick. We have stories from Ukambani in the past few years of people drinking kaluvu that is laced with I don't know what. So for the poor people, it's actually a very false choice for you to tell them, you have the luxury of choosing GMO and organic food. What is required is that the state is supposed to make that decision for the people, to protect the people, and we as a representative of the people must be given opportunity for us to be able to have a say on this matter, so that we have a blanket protection for everyone. Yes. Instead of pretending here that we can develop labels. Half of us consume things that, you only start reading the label after you realize, kwani hii ya leo imewekwa nini? That is when you start reading the label, after you've consumed the thing already. Yeah.
All right, and and I know we have Gladys Boschele. She's been really stoutly against also using the pesticides. I wanted just to maybe take that particular aspect of the GMOs and the impact on the environment at the end of the day. Because largely why we are going for GMOs, it has been argued, first of all, you're talking about the resistant crops, you know, and insects that, you know, can actually be destroying the herbicides that, you know, will not actually be affected by the insects, by the insects, you see. So there is that resilience. But at the end of the day, what is the flip side also on the environment? Did NEMA also participate in this? Because we have biomes that largely we know that the world is sitting under, that really give us that equilibrium. And there's a way that GMOs also upset these particular biomes at the end of the day. On the longer view of this, where are we headed when it comes to the environmental impact of it? We need insects to stabilize. There's the reason why the bees are here.
Before the expert comes in, Kirwa, you know, I remember we used to have a pesticide called DDT.
Yes.
And over the years, it was very effective in terms of pest control, but over the years, we realized that it had more negative effects than the good ones. We used to have a roofing material called asbestos. Yes. So all we are saying, these are complex conversations, Dibal, and it is not up to an individual to then just determine the fate of all of us by, you know, these whimsical declarations. This is why we need this engagement. We need to be able to understand. All our fears should be allayed, and then we move on as a people knowing what we are getting ourselves into.
Indeed. The asbestos, I remember they were carcinogenic.
Absolutely carcinogenic. And TDT, they had some residual effect that if you use DDT on maize, that maize will be eaten by a bird, and the bird, when it dies, will just go to the river, and even the fish that you will consume subsequent will have some of that residual effect, which are also cancerous. That was the side effect of the DDT. Now, my worry, and as Senator Manzo has been saying, is public participation. When you talk of public participation, it means experts also come in, other organizations also come in, and the members of the public, including elected members of parliament, will come in. Now, what I would want to hear from the cabinet is what is the legal framework they have set up for lifting the ban. You see, saying lifting the ban is like you have opened floodgates for all these things to come in without the necessary safety net. What is the legal framework they have put in place, and what is the component of public participation, and what are we doing? Already we are fighting. I saw the Senator was in issue talking about it on in one of the functions in his area of jurisdiction about the need for them to lobby Parliament not to allow certain chemicals to get into the farming community. Now, instead of the chemicals, now you are bringing GMOs, which is actually direct affront on what we consider to be disciplined farming. So it is worrying, and it is something that we are not just being alarmist. We are just being concerned Kenyans who know a bit of this science, and also who do appreciate that let God give us the longest life possible instead of taking a shortcut just because we want to solve a short-term political problem.
So the question is, have we crossed the Rubicon since we've had this lifting of a ban? What is the role also of you legislators in trying to tame this, if you think that enough hasn't been done adequately to make sure that every stakeholder is involved on this? And first of all, does it also cast aspersion to some of revelations that comes from the authority, like the National Biosafety Authority, that we're doubting what they're giving us, a clean slate of bill as far as this is concerned?
You see, before they say something, because they are our representatives, the danger with what we call executive, it has all overbearing presence in the lives of these officers.
But how do we know?
These officers are also job seekers. Some of the members of this biosafety team are job seekers. They want to be appointed in government, and therefore
they want to be retained.
They want to be retained or to be appointed to more lucrative positions. Therefore, they will compromise the lives of Kenyans at the altar of political expediency. And it is worrying me, And I think this agitation now should take another level. Civil society, the religious society, and also members of parliament. Those who still have a stand. Remember, Dibala, I've told you, when I was first elected in 1989 as member of parliament for Cherangani, we were a department within the office of the president. I'm seeing all the gains that we've had being reversed in 5 years or shorter period. It is my worry, and I hope this information shall be archived. The way I see William Ruto moving is to one-man show in this country. He does not believe, the way Honorable Sifuna said, he does not believe in the capacity of any other Kenyan other than himself performing to the expectations of Kenyans. That's why he can put anybody in any office just because he still wants to be the boss.
So you think all these pronouncements that we're having so far, we have the resumption of the CDF, that being also, shaken into place according to what the law should say, it should be predicated at least in law. We have also him pronouncing that, my cabinet, of which we are yet to see if we'll be having a 50-50. When you have the gender parity, everyone is saying that this has not really happened. All this, and now the pronouncement of the GMO, the lifting of the ban, is a do-gooder posturing that is coming from the executive just to make sure that he's pleasing Kenyans and making good of some of his promises at the end of the day, at whatever cost. Even if now there's a crisis of food, even GMOs should be considered. Then, Mazo,
no. For me, let me not say more. I've just said it is just a make-believe situation. And a make-believe situation is you are creating a picture that befits your already description of that situation for purposes of looking right. But you may not be doing the right thing.
Well, you see the idea of GMOs and the idea of food security and the idea of now that we have a situation in the country, we have to consult Kenyans, and it is very important that we don't end up into a situation where we used to be before, where it was one person running the country and the decision takes a day.
But what consulting Kenyans are we talking about? You had this thing in Parliament, you're discussing it over 10 years, you've told us. We didn't have any handy opportunity for you to consult Kenyans.
First of all, we had...
Because I'm assuming before it even maybe went through this I don't know if there was a bill and it went through... There was a bill, of course, now to set up the National Biosafety Authority, isn't it?
Yes.
It went through the rigmarole,
yes,
3 stages, assented by the President. Where was the place of the Kenyans participating then?
It is out of that biosafety bill in 2012, GMOs were banned in Kenya. And the ban has been so serious, it cannot just be lifted without a change of the law. There has to have been something in the two houses, because this affects the counties and the national government. Therefore, it should come before cabinet makes a decision. I hope this is just a proposal, but I believe it's a final opposition by an executive order of some sort. This should have been debated. Kenyans should have been allowed to participate. And the ban was not accidental. It was after serious deliberations by Parliament those days. And therefore, it should come back to the House. I believe we are not totally in short of food in the country. It's a matter of management, reorganization, and making sure that every Kenyan who is starving, the 4 million of them, are served. If they have done this, lifted the ban for purposes of supplying GMO food urgently to starving Kenyans, it may make sense when it is explained, and it must be known that as soon as we are through this crisis, we go back to the ban. But I am aware that President Samoei Ruto has been against this ban for years and has been waiting for the occasion he becomes president to allow GMOs. And I'm also aware that when he was Minister of Agriculture, he has a lot of deals with GMO manufacturing countries, and he has not convinced every Kenyan we must consume GMOs. So before Kenyans are fed on this, whether they have a choice or no choice, there must be some level of care by the current government to the all duty of care to Kenyans, duty of information. And that's why consultation, public participation is very key on this particular matter, and even research. And even when you listen to the scientists who came to present in Parliament, Some of them are already in this business, so they support it. But there are quite a number of many other organizations and many other scientists against the GMOs, lifting this country. They allowed the BT cotton and a little bit of testing, and finally it was also legalized or allowed to grow in the country. The full practicality of that has not yet been experienced. So for the bigger benefit of Kenyans, and treating cancer is more expensive than feeding Kenyans with the proper food. So I think there should be a very good balance on this. This trend of just making declarations without consultations is unconstitutional and is very injurious to Kenyans. I think there must be sufficient consultation before a matter of big magnitude like this is allowed.
All right. Without beating this matter to the ground and belaboring the point, I think you've made enough. But I wanted just to get clarity, Edwin Sifuna, because if this was on the floor of the House for 10 good years and we had this particular ban, it was pending investigation on either GMO if it's suitable for consumption or not. Because I think the ban was, let's ban it for now. Then we have the National Biosafety Authority who will be carrying out, assessment, investigation, research, and then come up with, confirmable, conclusive evidence that this is suitable for human consumption or for the consumption of the citizenry of Kenyans. So I want to maybe broach that particular issue because we've not really gone through a blow-by-blow account of why this has been lifted, what information has been actually put out there for the public consumption. It will have been ideal also for the government to tell us these are the reasons why we are lifting this particular ban at this particular time. But it would be unfair for you as well, Senator Dan Mazo, to come and say we can hark back to the history of the president when he was a Minister of Agriculture and their interest with some of these farms that we're talking about here regarding GMOs, because we don't have any stitch of evidence and a scrap of proof. We can actually treat that just as a hearsay.
What I have is his own utterances, and when this debate went on, the current president participated in this and made presentations. He was pro-GMO, and he's not the only one who is pro-GMO in the world. There are many other people, but you have to balance between the Kenyans who are pro and Kenyans who are against.
But you can't just peg a whole interest of some of his farms because he was pro.
But Dibal, remember, I was the Minister for Agriculture until the 8th of January 2008, when, according to the old constitution, traditionally, once a new cabinet has been appointed, you cease to be. I ceased to be on the 8th of January 2008, and there was some work pending. I remember with the former PS, who has been also doing a lot of research with some of these institutions, they were trying to convince me to move in that direction. And for me, I was cautious, given the little science that I know, and a lot of consultation I was doing outside the normal office arrangement, because at times it's dangerous if you are a minister, because some of these young men may be ministers in future, when you just rely on official information. You must rely on information from credible sources to be informed, so that even if you do not configure some kind of scientific questioning thesis, you are able to ask intelligent questions. The questions I was able to ask, intelligent questions, I was not given good answers. And I said, on the basis of this, we do not want to subject our country to risks beyond our capacity to handle. And that's why we are doing under controlled nature and in greenhouses here at the Akalro. And immediately I left the ministry. My good friend, William Ruto, became the immediate minister who succeeded me. And within the year, he was making these pronouncements, almost to the chagrin of anybody who has information on scientific research. So it is not anything that is hidden. It is something that he was professing, because the peers that he found in the office, Dr. Kiome, is somebody who has been doing all this work with many of these international organizations. I have the capacity to say this and the courage to say so, because I know we are dealing with something that Kenyans will come to say, why didn't you tell us? Remember, slave trade in Africa took more than 100 years, especially in southern Tanzania, where communities for 100 years, they were doing slave trade and they lost any other source of livelihood, and slave trade became a way of living. Now, this is another slave trade that we are bringing to Africa. We can still, with water, the answer to food security is water, water, water. You can produce 3 times what we are producing if you are able to use water on certain selected crops. With diversification, you can have better food security by ensuring that we have just, instead of monoculture or planting maize only, you do a bit of intercropping and other crops that can supplement food security. The main problem with us is that we have been conditioned to think that we are producing for export. We should be thinking of producing for our own people. And we have the capacity to do that, but we are abandoning all the traditional ways that we used to do in central Kenya, in western Kenya, in Ukambani, and we are now going the modern way, and we do not have the capacity to go modern fully. So this is the quagmire that we find ourselves in.
One of
can we hear from Sifuna?
I sum up one of the information I got, because I was in the Committee of Agriculture then, about the growing of GMOs. They need more herbicides than the normal products. They are even more expensive to grow. And that's why proper information must be given. This is a serious commercial venture about people making money, but not about the safety and welfare of Kenyans.
There's just one thing that I wanted to point out for you, Debal. There have been a lot of advances, not just in science, but even in legal theory from 2012. We have seen lesser pronouncements being struck down by our courts on the basis of lack of public participation. This represents a very major policy shift in the country. And what the point that Mheshimiwa was making here is that everything that is said to be banned or unbanned has to have some legal underpinning. There has to be a law that says you can't think of anything. The most famous example is, say, marijuana. Why is it not legal in Kenya? There is a law that says this is something that is proscribed. So every single time there is a major policy shift like this one, and we are not saying that science has not advanced from 2012. It is possible that the biosafety body that you're talking about there has found new research, or that there has been advances in science to allay the fears that we might have had in 10 years ago. All we're saying is, can you present that new thinking so that we all engage with it, so that we look for other objective sources that we can, ask the intelligent questions that Mheshimiwa Kirwa is talking about. Lay that information before the public. Let us have a proper conversation and make a decision as a country that yes, this is the way to go in order for us to achieve food security, that in fact there's no other better way, including some of the examples that Kirwa is giving, to actually achieve this in a safe manner for the public of Kenya. So what we want to see is a move from this unilateralism, a recognition of the power of public participation underpinned under Article 10, and putting whatever new development, science, knowledge has been generated the past 10 years for public discourse the way that we are doing it here. I don't think, you can't lock yourself in a room, a group of 20, 30 people calling yourself cabinet, and imagine that you are smarter than everybody else. And especially when it is not a matter that touches only on your welfare, it touches on the welfare of all of us. So let them present this evidence. We might not be scientists, but we can read and understand. And if it is explained to us, at least our fears can be allayed.
Thank you. We want to take a short break, and I agree with that. That not everybody is a smart aleck in the cabinet as well. Devoid of everyone's participation at the end of the day. I'm just reminded on a quote that Willie Rogers said, everybody is ignorant only on different subjects, right? So everybody is ignorant, right? Only different subjects. So we take a short break. Right? When we start back, of course, I wanted to just also broach a very critical issue here that is on the front page of the Business Daily. Let me try and just find where the Business Daily is so that I can show you this morning what is on the front page of the Business Daily quickly. And this is what is there. That said fully acquires Telecom Kenya in a 6.09 billion shillings deal. This is what is on the front page of the Business. Said fully acquires Telecom Kenya in 6.09 billion shilling deal. And there's a very interesting cartoon that I'll show you on the other side of the break. And I want to broach the issue of what also the president did last week in regard to the telcos, where we know right now that there will be a 40% discount for Fuliza for Kenyans as well. But the question everyone was broaching, we have other telcos as well. Telecom Kenya is here now. It's fully owned by the government after Helios now, of course, vacated, and they had the 60%